everybody. Hope you all had a good lunch. Hope it's not going to result in everybody falling asleep during this session. Hopefully we're going to keep you informed. So this panel is called Reaching the Connected Consumer. Online sessions have given way to online lives, as I'm sure we're all aware, as people are constantly connected to the web via mobile devices. People's needs change as they've moved from screen to screen, presenting a challenge and opportunity for businesses. This panel is going to explore how technology allows us to engage our audience in ways previously not possible. It's my great honor to welcome our panel today. I'll introduce them by name, and then I'm going to ask each of you to maybe just give a 30-second description of your businesses. On my right, very nice to see you not in your Arsenal shirt, which is how I see you most of the time, is Eric Salama, who is CEO of Kantar.
And wishes he was the manager of Arsenal.
Yeah.
As we all do. Correct.
Royston, who is VP and General Manager of Messaging ZenDesk. Ariya, Banomyong, who is Managing Director of Line. And Omaid, Hiwaizi, who is President of Global Marketing of Blippar. So, Eric, start with you.
So I run a business called Kantar, which is the data investment management part of WPP, which is a big marketing services company. And we do research and consulting, big data, small data, for a variety of clients around the world, big multinationals like Unilever and Samsung and Volkswagen, and local companies here in Singapore, and local companies like Alibaba in China or JBS in Brazil. So we have about 30,000 people around the world, and we help clients with everything from understanding their brands to helping them optimize their communication to figuring out how they use different channels to go to market, innovation, so a whole range of marketing-related research and consulting work.
Thank you. Royston?
Yeah, I guess I'm the local representative on this panel here. I was a co-founder of a company called Zopim, which was born and bred in Singapore. We developed software that connects businesses and customers through their website. So think about the best retail store experiences you've had, right? You tend to go into a store and a friendly assistant answers your question. So we bring this same experience onto any e-commerce store. So if customers have questions, there's this chat widget that pops up, and you can click on it and ask any questions you want, and a business representative will be on the other end answering your question. In 2014, we were acquired by a much larger customer support software company called ZenDesk that's based in San Francisco. And today, we are running the team out in Singapore that runs the chat side of the business, which was what we were doing before. And now we are also dabbling in messaging, which is where most consumers are on today. And we think that the future channel of choice for consumers to reach out to businesses will be through messaging. And that's why we're building a product that's geared towards that. Thanks.
Ariya, tell us a little bit about Line.
Yes, so I work for Line Thailand, but Line was essentially born out of Japan. So Japan is our largest market. Thailand is second, followed by Indonesia and Taiwan and a few other markets. So Line is one of the chat apps that is essentially known for stickers. And when I look at the audience, I'm sure that some of you are still like, sort of puzzled about, what the heck with stickers. But in this region, that's what works. Right? So you need to understand that. But beyond that, we have a lot of other businesses, like from games, content, e-commerce, payment, business solutions, you name it.
Omaid.
Great. Yeah, so I'm Omaid. I look after marketing at Blippar. Blippar's the leading visual browser app. What that means is it's an application on smartphones that allows you to point at anything in the world around you and get more. So you can point at a brand and get augmented reality content or content around that brand, or everyday objects and get visual search results. We're a British company founded in London. We just had our Series D round, so far we've raised $99 million. And we have ambitions to create what we call the Internet on Things. So anything that you see in the world around you, will have digital content attached to it and will be brought to life through our app via smartphones and potentially other devices in the future.
Cool. Okay, let's get started, guys. Bunch of questions that hopefully you're going to answer. Let's start with this one. Connected consumer is connected today in very many different ways. Let's start with how they're connecting with each other. There seems to be a shift from open social networks, such as Twitter and Facebook, to more private platforms, messaging, Snapchat. Why do you think that is? Eric, do you want to kick off?
I guess I don't think of Twitter and Facebook as being that open either, and I guess some of these platforms are blurring that, in a way, Twitter and Facebook are quite closed in some kind of ways, and within them you've got lots of applications which are more direct messaging, peer-to-peer, and some of the other apps are becoming broader, and the kind of WeChat and I guess Line, and we'll hear more from Line, are becoming more open. So I think there's probably a bit more of a blurring. I think the big change that's occurred over the last 5 years is that virtually no one goes onto the internet anymore, that everything is in-app. Mm-hmm. And so much of our behavior is in-app as opposed to, if you think back when the internet really started, it was all about going to public sites, and there's a lot less of that. So I think, generally speaking, a lot of our behavior is within app as opposed to more public, and then it just depends on what types of apps that we're using. But and that has lots of implications for the way that we do marketing and our ability to understand how people are behaving and what they're doing and our ability to target, because everything that happens within app is much more of a closed system to brand marketeers.
Omaid, do you want to add to that?
Well, I mean, it's certainly true that behavior is changing. I kind of wonder if it's changing because of the kind of natural cycle of uptake of platforms like this. I mean, who's a teenager wants to be on the same open platform as their parents, And so there's a kind of natural trend towards moving from platforms as they grow to scale. It seems to be the trends are shifting from one-to-many to one-to-one, as you're saying, or one-to-few, driven by, I guess, people wanting to be more specific about who they connect with in certain environments, wanting the formats that are emerging also are kind of much more snackable, short form, visually layered, as we've seen. One thing I will say that's interesting, actually, is there seems to be more innovation happening in Asia than there is over in the West. And I wonder if there's something about the culture over here which means that people are willing to try new things more quickly, and it's not the era-specific thing in the US. I'm quite interested to hear.
Yeah. So I think, for me, there are a couple of things. If you look at, first, on one hand, you mentioned about those who started as social networks. And if you look at over the past few years, they've actually evolved, right? It used to be about friends. But now you have news, you have a lot of things that go through your eyes that are not just your friends, right? And so usually what you end up doing is like, right now I'm at a conference, or I'm in the toilets, or I'm having breakfast, I'm having lunch, so you telling other people what you're doing, right? But when you look at chat is different. Chat is actually, for me, it's the actual definition of a social network, because people you're going to chat with are people you know, right? So in chat, for instance, if you use Line, you will have groups from your university friends, from the office. In the office, you will have subgroups. In Thailand, you have a group without your boss and a group with your boss, right? And you discuss different things. And that's a reflection of actually your social network. So these are the people you actually want to talk to, not just post messages to. So I think that's the difference that I see. And yes, culture plays a big part. Because when you look at chat, obviously like all the current chat apps in the market. But the behavior of consumers are very different. And even us, we're not dominant in all the markets. And culture plays a big part of that. Some chat apps are more like basics, because if you look at the Western culture, you want something simple. It's just, I just want to send a message. Don't bother me with anything else. But in this part of the world, we want something that is bling. You know, we want like the stickers. We want something that's playful. And so you need to understand that difference. And you know, even though everyone falls under a chat app, I think you need to understand the differences that appeal to different cultures.
Okay.
Royston? Being last in a panel is always fun because all the smart people have said all the smart stuff. And then I can't just say I agree. But just to add another perspective to this, I would put an analogy in there to say that between public channels and private channels, public being like the social networks and private channels being like one-to-one messaging apps, a public channel is more like a stage to us, the consumers. We put on a very curated front, a very filtered view of our life. So for example, I'm on stage now, right? I'm dressed up nicely, I gelled up my hair, and like I put on boots and everything. But that's my public persona. Do I feel comfortable doing this all the time? Maybe not, right? I need to fulfill my social needs of trying to connecting with my friends, trying to show them what's going on in my life, just exchanging just confidential, private information of my life. It's actually much easier for me to do all that in an unfiltered view through messaging apps, which I guess is why Snapchat and other messaging apps are gaining a lot of popularity. So as opposed to a stage, the private apps feels more like kind of a window into my life. Like I have no qualms showing certain video segments of my life to my friends, just to show them how my world is like. By I don't mean I, because I don't really use Snapchat, but this is what I've gathered from my sister, from the younger folks out there, the cooler folks out there. And so they are very used to taking a video of wherever they are at, whatever food they are eating, whatever sceneries they are at, and just posting it to a friend, totally unfiltered. And I think the second bit of a trend that's fueling this push towards more of a private network is the fact that the younger folks these days, they are more comfortable with a video device, right, like a camera. They are born with it. Whereas for the older ones like us, every time we take a selfie, we kind of need to groom ourselves and make sure we look good. Like when I take a selfie with my parent, he actually stands up, wears a shirt, and then goes gel his hair before he takes a selfie with me. Whereas kids are like totally unfiltered. They want to send fun stuff, annotate it, put some stickers in it, and then send it to their friends. So I think that's part of the reason why the push towards messaging is happening, the whole unfiltered thing that young people crave. Okay, so a marketing-related question, and Eric, one of our experts on marketing, being part of the big WPP conglomerate. How do brands reach their consumers in the messaging space? And if they are doing so, who's doing it best as far as you know?
I think that comes back to the point about Asia being so different to the West, because in Asia, we've had Line and we've had WeChat, who have really opened up the space for brands to be able to communicate with consumers. Whereas if Facebook Messenger has just introduced its bots into Facebook, WhatsApp hasn't really got a mechanism for doing that. So the Western messaging apps have been much more just messaging apps.
Do you think they're going to follow the
and they are.
lead?
I mean, both WhatsApp and Messenger are heading in that direction through the introduction of bots, and will do so. But it's a very tricky thing for them to do, because we think of our phones as being much more personal devices, our mobile phones, and you do get into issues of not just privacy from a legal point of view, but feeling like someone's intruding on my conversations and intruding in my space. So I think it's a really tough task for brands to think about how to really integrate themselves into these conversations. And there's been some very interesting stuff written. There was a very interesting Harvard Business Review article last month on branding in the age of social media. We've had some wonderful thought pieces from our people in TNS and in Millward Brown in Singapore about the use of messaging and brands in it. And it's a tough thing for brands to do, because you need to become part of the conversation. People don't want brand advertising just launched at them. They need to be able to ask for it. And so how you integrate yourself into the conversation, how you make yourself available but not be intrusive, is a really tough thing for brands to do. And they need to think very carefully about who they're talking to, what's the content. We've got tons of research that shows that if you just take content that you've used in other places, whether it's on TV or on websites, and you try and put it into apps, it bombs. It really isn't very successful at all. So you need to think about how to tailor content, what kind of content works, who your audience is. So that's a really tough thing to do. I would say that a lot of the brands in Asia have done a much better job of doing that than any of the Western brands.
Are any of the Western brands doing it on the Asian platforms?
I think some of the Western brands are doing it, and you've got some brands, and I would look at a brand like Burberry that has built a social media presence, not just in apps, but online, where the experience of interacting with Burberry feels incredibly natural in social media and online, and it doesn't feel intrusive, and the brand lives in social media. But a lot of the packaged goods brands, the car brands, the financial service brands, it feels like they're trying really hard to do something not very successfully.
Guys, anything to add?
Maybe because we've worked closely with Facebook to launch their businesses on messaging initiative. So we've had some first-hand experience working with some of the customers who were first to adopt that platform. And the way we see Facebook approaching it is, I think, quite prudent. The way they do it is that they know they cannot just wholesale copy what, say, WeChat has done. WeChat is a huge, diverse marketplace where you can do almost anything on the messaging platform, right? They know they cannot immediately inculcate that kind of behavior in the Western world, mainly because the big difference is that in the Western world, the whole app ecosystem, the whole web infrastructure is a lot more mature than in the Eastern world. So in the Eastern world, the first app you have may be WeChat, and therefore through it you will want to do most of your transactions. Whereas in the Western world, you have your Uber apps, you have all sorts of apps, dating apps, and you kind of, consumers are used to the behavior of going to those apps to perform those actions. So what Facebook seems to be doing is to build the messaging behavior into the current customer journey. So I'll bring up two examples, which is the two customers that we've worked with, Evelyn and Zulily. They are e-commerce platforms. Instead of shopping directly on Messenger as a start, what Facebook did was to work with Evelyn and Zulily to have Messenger in the checkout portion of the flow, right? So after you have checked out and you are supposed to receive an invoice or shipping updates, instead of getting it sent to your email, which nobody really checks anyway, it goes into some spam folder, right? You have the option to say, hey, I know that you're Royston, would you like to receive notifications through Messenger instead? And that's really smart. So once you click on it, you receive constant shipping updates saying that, oh, your package is now arriving next day. And if any time in this entire journey, you wish to make a change to the product, you wish to cancel the product, for example, you can do that seamlessly through Messenger. And there's push notifications letting you know all the time about the latest updates. So it's a very seamless process for consumers who are trying Messenger for the first time. And this year, I think they're going one step further to make Messenger sort of like the shopping destination as well, with what they call bots on Messenger. So you can start shopping within the messaging platform as well. And I think that's the direction that Facebook is slowly trying to explore to bring more of that consumer behavior into Messenger.
Omaid, I'm going to just change the question and sort of flip a little bit. The Blippar's been live for what, 3, 4 years?
4 years, yeah.
4 years, okay. Where's the biggest take-up geographically? You finding more success in Asia or in the US? Or?
Well, I mean, so the model we have currently is driven by where we run campaigns with brands.
Right.
And so the result of that, the bulk of that work's been done in the UK and the US. So, you know, roughly a third of our base is in the UK, a third in the US, and the rest distributed. And that'll grow in line when we're doing partnerships with brands of where those campaigns are executed. Where we're headed to with visual search is much more ubiquitous, because then it'll become available and highly functional wherever it works. So
do you see your existing product reaching the Asian market?
Yes, so we've run multiple campaigns in different countries. So with Nestle and with in Singapore, actually with Diageo on Guinness and so on. And actually, there are very few barriers to uptake if it's executed in the way that we know works brilliantly, with the right calls to action at the right points. The uptake happens very, very well. And in that instance, you see, people are choosing to engage. So I guess to the point which I think you're alluding to in the question that we've kind of pivoted from, I guess it's a pull message as opposed to a push message in that instance. People are kind of wanting to know more and to engage more.
Mm-hmm. Ariya, what about Line?
So I just want to give an example, because a lot of you are not familiar with what Line does. So some of the brands in Thailand, what they do is, so basically they build a home within Line where they can engage with their consumers. And the engagement works two ways, because a messenger app is meant to chat. So it allows actually customers to chat with the brand. But chatting with the brand doesn't mean that everyone is chatting, like 30 million people are chatting at the same time. It can be a one-to-one or one-to-few or one-to-many channels. And responses can be either automated or you can put people behind that. So you can do customer service and that kind of things. The other thing that they do is, what we're trying to do, or what clients are trying to do, is actually close the loop. Because when you have like a brand like AS, they have like 30 million followers on their official account under Line. So what it allows them to do is, when they push these messages, it allows customers to react to that. And if they are interested, what they see is it's not just an ad. They can actually engage with that ad. So it means that it's either a video, or it can be a product that they're selling on a mobile phone, and you can hit that button, pay, and the mobile phone can be sent to you. So we're completely bypassing apps, websites, and putting that all into one same place. So from a consumer standpoint, it's just easier because it's all there. Rather than having to download like apps or going to websites, you take what's useful to your customers and you put it here. So you're not trying to put the entire website into Line, or you're not trying to put like millions of apps into Line, but you choose what is relevant and useful to your customers. So it becomes a channel for brands to sell products, to service their customers, to engage with their customers.
Okay.
And I think one of the issues for brand marketers is if you went back not that long ago, even like 20 years ago, and you were working at Procter & Gamble, the largest advertiser in the world, you kind of knew what the playbook was. You knew that you could advertise on TV, that would generate a certain amount of awareness. That awareness would lead to a certain amount of trial or increased purchase, and you kind of knew what the return on investment was. And you grew up in Procter & Gamble, and you knew that as a marketeer, you knew how TV worked. What we're dealing with now is lots of change, lots of experimentation, lots of things that work, lots of things that don't work. But there isn't a real culture within most organizations of having a playbook. So they've tried things, some things have worked or not. We do work with them on ROI and combinations that work, but we're still not at the point where you could go to any of the marketing organizations and say, right, what's the way that, if you want to launch a new product, what's the combination of using personalized content in messaging apps and social media and TV and Facebook and Google? What's the right combination of that? So we and others are helping clients do that, but I think we're still probably 5 years away from that feeling natural within organizations, and organizations really knowing this is the playbook to launch a new product, this is a playbook to launch an extension, to go into a new market. We're still all kind of finding out new things.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So we'll move on to another question. And as we know, the digital connectivity is making interactions between brands and consumers even more immediate, with live streaming, instant notification messaging, which we've talked about. Do you think there's a danger that brands overstep the mark? And particularly, how does the luxury brand work in this new environment, where hitherto there's been a certain mystique attached to those brands, and of course now it's just open to the masses? Maybe, Omaid, you want to start?
I mean, when I hear that question, it reminds me of something that Howard Gossage said, who was one of the kind of ad men of the 50s who refused to go to New York. He didn't like the Mad Men at all. He was the anti-madman and stayed in San Francisco and never allowed his agency to grow beyond 12 people. And he said, people read things that interest them, and sometimes that's your ad. You know, and the point about it is that, you know, what's really important about this stuff is that, you know, we're in an era where, you know, reach and push and so on are on diminishing returns. And actually what's required is for brands to actually be interesting. So that doesn't mean to pretend to be interesting, it's actually to be current. It's not about dad dancing and trying to be relevant, it's somehow kind of rethinking how you behave. How can you, you know, to the examples you were giving, you know, not act like a boring man in the pub interrupting your conversation, you know, with your best friend, but instead be someone you overhear and you break off your conversation with your best friend and you go talk to him. How'd you do that, you know? I think that's the era we need to be in, regardless of all these different opportunities we have to do this. And actually, what I think about luxury brands is that there's a challenge around luxury brands where, you know, with technology, a lot of the time when we're executing, we kind of have this, necessarily we have this MVP mindset, minimal viable product mindset. So it's a kind of cut down thing to get going. And there's the nature of luxury experiences, which are kind of highly curated, you know, really, really detailed. A lot of the detailing is just because, you know, it's about flourish and it's not necessary. And so we have to be careful to really keep the tone right for luxury brands. I mean, there's been a few examples mentioned where in technology it's very easy to kind of cut it back. I don't think there are a huge number of examples. I mean, the examples are the ones that Burberry and, you know, who are the point there is they keep same ones keep getting wheeled out.
But I think they've done it very well, right?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Probably the only one
that
has. Royston, do you want to?
Yeah, I'm no subject matter expert at luxury items, but I do think that these tools, these channels are simply an extension of a brand's persona. So you could have the most benign platform, and if you offer it to a spammy company, they would think of ways to abuse the system to get that message or marketing material out. But if you think about a luxury brand, if you think about the experience they have in maybe their retail store, they have a very professional looking concierge serving you, guiding you to whatever you want. You can recreate this experience in the messaging world as well and say, hey, if you need help, any kind at all, just talk to us. We'll find maybe the location that's closest to you for you to you know, complete your shopping. We may advise you on maybe even your fashion, like you know, look of the day, maybe, you know, show what you're going to wear today, and we can give you some advice on that. So there can be a little bit of that high-class digital concierge thing that goes on for messaging as well. It's just an extension of a brand's persona to me.
Ariya,
I'd like to add one thing, you know, because you mentioned about, is there a risk for brands overstepping, you know, some rules? And just picking on what Eric was saying earlier about, you know, like if you look at the playbook, the marketing playbook, I mean, I think it's not overstepping some rules. You need to break some rules, right? Because you're in a day and age where the way you interact with consumers has to be different, right? If you're going to chat with a consumer as a brand, you cannot be like, it's not a cover letter, right, that you're sending to someone. It can't be formal. It can't be like so scripted. Right? It's not going to feel real because you're chatting with someone, right? So it has to feel human. The brand has to be more human, right? And so in the way you engage, I think you have to be a little bit less formal depending on the channel that you use, right? And you know, that's going to feel a little bit uncomfortable because that's going to break a lot of your branding guidelines, right? Even copywriting, I'm not saying that it's wrong, you just need to adapt it to today's channel that you have. And I think that's a big difference I see.
I mean, you just step out of this conference room and you go downstairs to the shopping mall. You know, the thing that luxury brands have got is they control the experience. And we've got some luxury brand clients who, for example, refuse to be listed on Amazon because they don't feel they can control the experience, that you're one of 100 brands that comes up and you're not controlling that experience. And yet when you go to China and you look at Singles Day, all of the brands are having to go there because they can't afford not to. So I think for the luxury brands in particular, the biggest issue really is as they move to e-commerce and m-commerce, and as you move on to messaging and other platforms where you're not as in control, how do you make sure that the experience that you're delivering feels like a premium luxury experience? Because you don't want to become like any other brand. And that comes back to the point that you're making about really thinking about, you know, how do you get the tone right? What's the right way of doing it?
Right. Okay. Eric, I just want to go back to when we were talking about the privacy issues, and you were mentioning the apps are perhaps more private than the open social networks. But we looked up a bit of research recently, and I'd hazard to guess it might even be Kantar research, which says that on average people have 80 apps on their phones, but regularly only open 3. Okay. Big question: do you think the age of the app is over?
No, I think the age of the app is there. What's happening is that, especially in the West, you've got a small number of apps that control many things. And in China, you can do everything in WeChat. You can book your cab, you can buy stuff online, you can chat to people. So, you know, one of the issues if you're in China, why do you go outside WeChat? So, and if you look at the amount of advertising money, Google and Facebook still take, if you're in the West, probably 80% of all of the advertising money that's going online. So I don't think that it's the age of the app is dying in any kind of way. It's that there is huge concentration in some of the bigger apps, whether it's Facebook and Google or WeChat and Line, massive concentration there.
Right. Royston, do you think that's synonymous with the Asian market as well? Or?
Yeah, I think it's premature to say that the age of apps is going to be over. I think the importance of apps has been diminishing. Facebook, at their recent conference, they've been talking about app fatigue and saying that messaging apps should be the platform for a lot of lightweight interactions to happen. I think that's the case as well. But from talking to businesses, it is clear that no one wants to give away control of the customer experience to another platform. So businesses are not convinced that they should hand over the relationship onto another messaging app. They would rather keep that experience within their own apps. So I think the sort of compromise would be if a consumer is supposed to interact with a business for maybe 1 or 2 times, the first 1 or 2 couple of interactions, that might be on another platform, right? And if it's something that I'm going to use very often, like I always go back to this site to make my e-commerce purchases, it would then make sense for me to have a richer, more immersive experience by downloading that app. And through the messaging platform, you can also push links to say, hey, you've been buying this for like 5-6 times. Why don't you get a 15% discount if you download our app? So I think it's going to be a very synergistic kind of an ecosystem.
Okay, without going around the panel, I've just seen that it says here, time's up, but I'm going to ask one question. In this age of connecting with the consumer, the connected consumer, one big thing that you think is going to take this market by storm in the next couple of years? Start with you, Aaron.
I think one thing I'd like to say is the reason why I think you're here and the theme of this event is to put like, you know, some of the startups and some of the brands together, right? Because on one hand, you have like people who have ideas but don't have funding. On the other hand, you have people who have access to a lot of budget and spending, and you're struggling with innovation, right? And the way I look at it is, as a brand, you can't be good at everything. And I think we're entering in an age where, you know, partnership, like meaningful partnership, is what's going to make it work. So you were talking about content, for instance. I used to work for Google, right? So I know YouTube very well, and all the brands like had a hard time creating content, right? And so how about you rely on someone who's good at creating content? Essentially, your content partners, the existing content partners. You know? There are so many content creators, so let them create that content for you. You know? Innovation, well, then partner with startups, because they're good at innovation. Because what's happening today is all the brands, all the companies have an innovation department. But you're taking people who have been in the company for 10 or 15 years, and suddenly you tell them, go and innovate. Is that going to happen?
Can I interrupt, Royston? 30 seconds.
So the question was, how are we going to make the world more connected, right?
Yeah.
One big trend.
One big thing.
So from what I'm seeing right now, the biggest hurdle between consumers and brands and being more connected is the scale and the volume of potential interactions between brand and consumers. That's what's worrying most of the larger brands. And I think people keep talking about bots. It's still early days. I think some level of automation to deal with a certain percentage of those queries is going to be important so that you can deflect at least maybe 50–60% of those conversations and have them automated or be self-service before a real human comes and handle the conversation. That's got to be something that happens because the more real-time the channel is, the more interactions you're going to get. And that seems to be the biggest hurdle, I feel.
Omaid, what's going to change the world apart from Blippar?
I think Blippar's going to change the world. If you talk
This
about,
world.
if you talk about what the thing that everyone in this room needs to think about that's going to change everything, including how people connect with each other, it's the application of artificial intelligence as it becomes more ubiquitous. The way that we're driving visual search is through computer vision, which is an application of artificial intelligence. And I'd encourage everyone to think about that because it truly will democratize lots of things that are currently inaccessible and transform every marketplace, how every brand needs to interact, and how we connect with each other.
Eric, last word.
I don't think it's going to change the world, but I think we'll have a lot of advertisers saying social media doesn't work, we can't build brands in this environment, and that's not because social media doesn't work or they can't build brands, it's because they're not really thinking carefully about who they're trying to interact with, what the content is, what's the tone. But I think a lot of advertisers are going to start saying, it doesn't work for us, we can't build brands.
Interesting. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you.